Hello, I'm Thomas Howard. Today I want you to picture this. You're waiting for a long overdue DoorDash delivery. But instead of hot pizza, you get a notice saying that your order has been delayed by endless bureaucracy. That's what cannabis reform kind of feels like right now. You might have thought that with Trump back in office, cannabis would swiftly move from Schedule 1 to Schedule 3. But in these first few weeks, the signals coming in from his cabinet suggest a very different story. On the Lex Fridman podcast, Trump said medical marijuana has been amazing. I've had others and doctors telling me it's been absolutely amazing. At first glance, these words sound supportive, almost as if we're finally on the cusp of a long awaited reform. But then he adds that legalization has to be done in a really concerted, lawful way. In other words, while he's open to the benefits of medical cannabis, he insists that safety control and strict regulation must be included. Let's step back for a moment and consider what's at stake. Under federal law, marijuana is still 2025 classified as a Schedule 1 substance, putting it in the same category as heroin and LSD. This classification not only stifles scientific research, but also forces legal businesses to pay sky-high taxes under Section 280E of the tax code. During the Biden administration, there was real hope that the accumulation of scientific evidence would lead to a shift to Schedule 3, a category shared with drugs like Tylenol with codeine and ketamine, which would have eased research restrictions and provided much needed tax relief. But now, with Trump back in charge, his cabinet pick suggests that we're facing a very cautious, even conservative approach to cannabis reform. Take, for example, Pam Bondi. You may or may not remember Bondi as the former Florida Attorney General who back in 2013 argued in a court brief that Florida's proposed medical marijuana amendment was misleading because it would allow use in limitless situations. Now, she's probably going to be serving as the nation's top law enforcement official. Bondi's record clearly points to an enforcement first, cautious approach rather than a willingness to embrace sweeping reforms. Her past statements make it clear that she's not exactly a champion for federal marijuana legalization or even smoked medical cannabis. Then there's Derek Maltz, the Trump appointed acting administrator of the DEA. Maltz isn't a newcomer to the drug war. He brings decades of experience to his role. He's been vocal in it, saying, "It's crystal clear to me that the Justice Department hijacked the rescheduling process, placing politics above public safety." He emphasized the need for scientific evaluation, adding, "If there's scientific evidence to support this decision, then so be it. But you got to let the scientists evaluate it." This statement isn't just standard bureaucratic language, it reflects deep rooted skepticism within the DEA about the safety and efficacy of medical cannabis. Finally, adding an intriguing twist to the story is Robert F. Kennedy Jr., nominated to head the Department of Health and Human Services. Kennedy has long been an advocate for cannabis legalization and has touted its potential to generate tax revenue and improve public health. Yet, in his confirmation hearing, he stated, "I will defer to the DEA's expertise on this matter." This is a puzzling admission. The head of HHS, whose primary responsibility would be evaluating the medical benefits of cannabis, is essentially saying that the final word belongs to an agency that remains firmly opposed to any reclassification. It's like having a doctor who insists that the final diagnosis will be called by someone else. That's supposed to be your job, bro. Now, you might be asking yourself, if Trump himself has expressed support for decriminalizing small amounts of marijuana, why is progress stalling? The answer lies in the internal dynamics of this administration. On one hand, Trump's rhetoric is populist. He once said in 2015, "I feel strongly about not criminalizing people for small amounts of marijuana." On the other hand, his cabinet picks, mostly Bondi and Maltz, signal a deep commitment to traditional law and order principles. Their strict views on drug policy mean that any quick move to change cannabis rules will likely get stuck in a government mess of red tape. So, what are the possible outcomes? Let's explore three potential scenarios. First, the optimistic scenario, full rescheduling to Schedule 3. This outcome, despite the internal resistance, overwhelming public support, and robust scientific evidence, push the administration to reclassify cannabis. This would be a game changer for the industry, eliminating the harsh tax burdens imposed by Section 280E and unlocking opportunities for clinical research that could lead to breakthrough treatments. Imagine a world where legal cannabis businesses could claim standard deductions and researchers could run clinical trials without drowning in red tape. Unfortunately, given the stances of Bondi and Maltz, this Rapid transformation seems very unlikely. So, second, we may face a prolonged incremental process. Here, the HHS issues its recommendation in favor of rescheduling based on emerging clinical data. However, when that proposal lands on the DEA's desk, acting Administrator Maltz and his team just delay or even block change by citing concerns over public safety and the potential for abuse. This scenario would leave cannabis sort of in a regulatory limbo for years, where minor policy tweaks might be implemented but the full benefits of reclassification remain perpetually out of reach. Waiting for federal cannabis legalization is somewhat like standing by a glacier as it inches forward. Everyone assures you that change is happening and coming, but the slow pace is agonizing and seemingly absent. The third scenario is the worst. That's no change at all. In this situation, internal divisions and entrenched bureaucratic mindsets and the conservative leanings of key agencies keep cannabis locked in Schedule 1 indefinitely. For millions of patients who rely on cannabis for relief, and for an industry that has grown very large over the past decades, this would be a devastating setback. As one industry lawyer, me, I guess, put it bluntly, if you thought Trump was going to rapidly legalize cannabis, you might need to adjust your expectations. Internal resistance could stall progress indefinitely. Let's talk a bit about what these classifications mean in practical terms. Under Schedule 1, cannabis remains subject to stringent federal restrictions that stifle cannabis research and impose severe tax burdens on legal businesses. For example, because cannabis is treated like heroin, businesses are denied ordinary deductions, forcing them to operate at a much higher effective tax rate. Conversely, reclassification to Schedule 3 would not only recognize its medical value, but would also allow companies to operate on a level playing field with other legal industries. This is very important in a sector that has already invested billions in compliance and innovation. Moreover, think about the impact on research. Currently, cannabis is one of the most difficult to study substances simply because of its Schedule 1 status. It creates huge regulatory hurdles. Researchers eager to explore its potential benefits for conditions like epilepsy, chronic pain, or PTSD are denied by red tape. Reclassification would pave the way for more extensive clinical trials and evidence-based assessments that could finally put science in control of the conversation. But let's not overlook the DEA's concerns. Their lengthy statement emphasized that unapproved cannabis and cannabis-derived products have not undergone rigorous FDA approval clinical trials needed to confirm safety and efficacy. These concerns are baseless. Cannabis can impair driving, affect cognitive functions, and potentially contribute to mental health issues. It's used as a drug for its psychoactive purposes, after all. Yet many in the scientific community argue that these risks are manageable and mostly overblown by stigma attached to the long criminalization of the cannabis plant. In states like Colorado, for example, adult use cannabis has been legal for over a decade with strong regulatory systems in place that minimize abuse while maximizing other benefits. Politically, there's another layer. Polls show an overwhelming public support for medical cannabis reforms. Polls show approval rates as high as 88%. Voters see the outdated Schedule 1 classification as a relic that unjustly criminalizes millions. However, despite this public sentiment, the federal machinery seems determined to move on it not at all. It's like the difference between an instantaneous gratification of a smartphone app and the sluggish pace of 10,000 hours of concentrated practice to gain expertise. Let's circle back to Trump's own words. His support for decriminalization of marijuana, combined with his emphasis on a really concerted, lawful way to legalization. This suggests a kind of political tightrope. He wants to appeal to voters who are tired of the harsh penalties associated with cannabis, yet he's not willing to upend decades of conservative enforcement traditions. It's a balancing act that leaves us with an uncertain future. Imagine sitting through a DEA hearing where experts from every side debate the merits and risks of rescheduling cannabis. We may get one of those hearings in 2025 after the interlocutory appeal. The clock ticks away while the audience, cannabis businesses, researchers, patients, and you, wait with bated breath for a decision that could reshape an entire industry. It's a high-stake drama where the outcome is murky as heck, and every participant is playing for keeps and their own interests. And many are just labeling it all as hemp and selling as much as they can online and at every street corner store. In the meantime, the economic implications continue to mount for real cannabis licenses. Under Schedule 1, legal cannabis businesses are forced into a penalty box of sorts, paying much higher taxes and often getting debanked. If cannabis were rescheduled to Schedule 3, these businesses could finally access standard tax deductions and compliance with federal law, dramatically reducing their operations costs. And for an industry that has grown by leaps and bounds, this isn't just a technicality. It could be a windfall that could drive further investment and innovation. Jamie Dimon even said that JP Morgan would bank cannabis if it were legal to do so. Plus, for researchers, reclassification would be a dream come true. With fewer regulatory barriers, scientists could conduct comprehensive studies, develop new therapies, and even discover unexpected benefits of cannabis that could perhaps revolutionize medicine. But until the federal government catches up with public opinion and scientific evidence, researchers will continue to face a wall of bureaucratic obstacles. And so, where do we stand? Based on these early signals, if you thought Trump was going to legalize it or at least reclassify cannabis rapidly, you may need to adjust your expectations. Internal resistance from Bondi and also law enforcement's best friend, Derek Maltz, and his unwavering caution over the DEA, and then RFK saying it's the DEA's shot to call. This all points to a slow, incremental process at best, and possibly no change at all. Yet, despite these challenges, the pressure from public opinion is undeniable. 88% of voters across the country are calling for federal medical marijuana, and most states have already taken bold steps to regulate cannabis in ways that contradict federal classification. Conflict of state-level innovation and federal inaction creates a tension that should force a change in long-held cannabis policies. As we wrap up, it's important to recognize that while swift federal reform may not be imminent, each small step brings us closer to acknowledging the medical and economic benefits of cannabis. And I value your perspective. Do you think public pressure will eventually overcome the entrenched positions within federal bureaucracy? Or are we facing a prolonged struggle? Your thoughts fuel this conversation, so please share them in the comments below. And if you found this discussion helpful, please like this video and subscribe to the channel. Your engagement helps us continue exploring these critical topics. Thank you for sticking with us through this deep dive into Trump's first few weeks of cannabis policy. Stay informed, stay engaged, and let's keep pushing for progress, even when it feels like we're waiting for a pizza that's forever stuck in the DoorDash app.